Hello everyone, viewers. Open your history book, flip through the pages. You'll read about kings and queens, about wars fought for land and faith, about the grand march of progress from antiquity to the modern age. It is a neat story, isn't it? A straight line. But what if that line is a lie? What if the real history, the one that truly shaped our world, was never written down? What if it was lived in the shadows, whispered in coded language? The textbook tells you about the Catholic Church's power in medieval Europe. It tells you about heresies, groups of people who dared to believe differently. It mentions, perhaps in a footnote, a group called the Cathars. It calls them heretics and says they were extinguished like a candle flame. But the book doesn't ask the most important question: what happens when you try to extinguish? The story begins not in a king's court, but in the rugged, windswept peaks of Languedoc, in what is now southern France. This was the heartland of the Cathars. To the church in Rome they were a cancer, a dualist heresy that claimed the material world, the world of flesh and stone and gold, was the creation of a lesser evil god. They believed the true God, the God of... They called themselves the good Christians, and their spiritual elites, the perfects or parfaits, lived lives of extreme asceticism, rejecting meat, property, and physical pleasure. They were peaceful, they were compassionate. And for that, Rome decided they had to be annihilated. The year is 1209. Pope Innocent III calls for the Albigensian Crusade. A name that sounds ancient and remote, but it was a storm of fire and steel unlike anything seen before. The Pope's crusaders, led by ruthless barons from the north, descended on Languedoc. Their commander, Simon de Montfort, was a man carved from granite and cruelty. When his soldiers asked him how to tell Cathar from Catholic in the besieged city of Bephasias, the papal legate allegedly uttered the chilling words, "Kill them all, God will know his own." And so they did. 20,000 men, women and children were slaughtered in a single day. The streets ran with so much blood it was said to have spilled over the city walls. This wasn't a war of conversion. It was a war. Their castles, perched on impossible mountain crags like eagles' nests, were besieged and conquered one by one. But the Cathars did not break. Their faith was a fortress stronger than any stone. They believed they were sparks of divine light trapped in the prison of flesh, and death was not an end, but a release, a return home. Yet they held a secret, a treasure. The history books, if they mention it at all, call it the Cathar treasure. They speculate it was gold or church relics, something to fund their resistance. They are wrong, so very wrong. Our story finds its focus on the last great fortress, the final bastion of Catharism, Mons Fega, perched atop a dizzying rock pedestal, a pog. It seemed to touch the sky. By 1240, outside, the Royal Army of France, 10,000 strong, laid siege. For 10 long, brutal months, Mons Fega held. The defenders, a few hundred strong, repelled every assault, but they were starving. They were freezing. They knew the end was near. On the 1st of March, 1244, they negotiated a truce, a 15-day ceasefire before they would surrender. The Crusaders agreed, confident, but something strange happened during those 15 days. Something the history books cannot explain. 4 of the parfaits, under the cover of a blizzard on a moonless night, were lowered down the sheer cliff face on ropes. They carried nothing but small leather satchels. They melted into the darkness and were never seen again. What were they carrying? What could be so important that 4 of the most holy men would risk a suicidal descent, leaving their brothers and over 200 Cathars, men and women who refused to renounce their faith, were marched down the mountain? They didn't weep or beg for mercy. They walked calmly, almost serenely, to their pyre. They were burned alive in a massive bonfire at the foot of the mountain, in a place still known today as the Field of the Burned. With the smoke and ash of the last parfaits, the Church believed the Cathar heresy was finally... The flame had not gone out. It had simply disappeared into the shadows. And the treasure. The secret those 4 men carried into the night. It wasn't gold, it wasn't jewels. It was knowledge, a key, a secret teaching that the Cathars believed was passed down from John the Baptist, a truth so profound it could undo the very foundations of the world Rome had built. Some called it the Book of Love. Others, this knowledge, this grail, was now loose in the world, guarded by a fugitive brotherhood born from the ashes of Mons Figa. And for centuries, the powers that be would hunt for it, desperate to reclaim or destroy it, while its guardians worked silently, waiting for a time when the world would be ready to receive it. The official story ends here, but this is where our story truly begins. It created a ripple in time, a secret stream flowing beneath the river of official history. This stream would surface in the most unexpected of places, in the hands of the most enigmatic of figures. To understand where it went next, we must leap forward 200 years. The Renaissance is dawning. Europe is rediscovering the knowledge of the ancient world. But while men like Leonardo da Vinci were looking to Greece in the court of Rudolph II, the Holy Roman Emperor, in his castle in Prague, a city of alchemists, mystics, and Kabbalists, an object appears that defies all explanation. It is a book, a manuscript of about 240 vellum pages, but it is unlike any book ever seen. Its pages are filled with elegant flowing script, a language that no one on earth can read. Cryptographers, linguists, even artificial intelligence in our own time have been utterly defeated by it. This is the Voynich Manuscript, and it is not just the text that is alien. The illustrations are the stuff of dreams or nightmares. There are detailed drawings of plants that do not exist on this planet. Some look like amalgams of known species, others are utterly fantastical, with roots like coiled intestines. There are astronomical charts of constellations we cannot identify, diagrams of what appear to be stars and nebulae seen through a powerful telescope, centuries before the telescope was invented. And then there are the most bizarre pages of all, the balneological section. It shows dozens of small, naked women, all with strangely distended abdomens, bathing in pools and streams of green liquid flowing through an intricate system of pipes and tubes that resemble internal organs. What is this book? A hoax. The level of detail, the consistency of the script, the sheer artistry of the vellum and inks, all suggest it is not. Is it the lost language of a forgotten people? An encyclopedia of an alien world? Or is it something else? Could it be the Cathar Grail transformed? The secret knowledge, so dangerous it had to be encoded in a form that no one could accidentally stumble upon. The ultimate cipher, a book that can only be read by those who already hold the key. Think about it, a book of botany from another world. A celestial... This is not theology, this is science. A different kind of science. A science, perhaps, that views the material world not as God's creation, but as a flawed system, just as the Cathars believed. A science that explains how to navigate it, how to heal its strange flora, how to understand its hidden cycles. The manuscript passed through the hands of the alchemist John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's court magician. A man, he owned it for years, but by all accounts he could not crack it. He believed it held the secrets of Enoch, the biblical patriarch who was said to have walked with God. Perhaps Dee was closer to the truth than he knew. The manuscript disappears and reappears throughout history, a phantom object, a puzzle box passed from one seeker to another. It always ends up in the hands of those who walk the fringes of society. The official world, the world of science and academia, looks at the Voynich Manuscript and sees a curiosity, an anomaly, but those who remember the fires of Mons Figa see something else. They see a promise, a legacy. They see the perfect hiding place for a truth so powerful it had to be dressed in the clothes of madness. The book is a lock, and for centuries the key was missing. Or perhaps someone to carry the knowledge in their own being, to watch over the manuscript and humanity waiting for the right moment. And that, viewers, brings us to the glittering, treacherous courts of 18th century Europe. An age of reason, of enlightenment, a time when science and logic were supposed to have banished the superstitions of the past. And right in the middle of it all, a man appears who is the very embodiment of the impossible. A man who should not exist. He simply appears in the high society of Paris around 1740. He is impossibly charming. A virtuoso on the violin, a painter of breathtaking skill. He speaks a dozen languages so perfectly that in every country he is mistaken for a native. He is a brilliant chemist, an alchemist who can, before the astonished eyes of the French court, remove the flaws from a diamond. He seems to have unlimited wealth, but these are just his superficial talents. It is the man himself who is the true mystery. He looks to be in his mid-40s, handsome and vital, and he never ages. The Countess von Georgi, an elderly woman, meets him in Venice and is shocked. She remembers meeting him when she was a young girl, 50 years earlier, and he looked exactly the same. Exactly. Is it possible, she asks him, trembling. No, madame, he replies softly. But I myself was living in Venice at the end of the last and the beginning of this century. The implication is staggering. He is claiming to be well over 100 years old, and this is just the beginning. The composer Rameau recalls a conversation where St. Germain speaks of meeting King Richard the Lionheart on the Third Crusade, describing the king's mannerisms with he casually mentions giving advice to Jesus Christ, speaking of him as a man he knew, whose end he deeply regretted. He speaks of the secrets of the Egyptian pyramids, as if he was there when they were built. Voltaire, the great cynic of the age, was fascinated by him, calling him the man who knows everything and who never dies. He moved through the courts of Europe like a phantom. He was a trusted diplomat for King Louis XV of France, a secret envoy trying to broker peace in the 7 Years' War. He established factories for dyeing fabrics with colors of a vibrancy never before seen. He gave elixirs to his friends, potions he claimed would prolong life. Madame de Pompadour, the king's mistress, was obsessed with him. Yet she could never penetrate his mystery. Was he a brilliant charlatan? The greatest con man in history, if so, how did he maintain the illusion for over 60 years under the intense scrutiny of Europe's most powerful and intelligent people? He never asked for money. He never sought power for himself. He only ever seemed to be observing, guiding, gently nudging history from the shadows. Imagine this man, the wonderman of Europe. He would appear, live in a city for a few years, become the talk of the town. And then, just as people's questions became too pointed, he would vanish, only to reappear a decade later in another country, not a day older. He would change his name, but his identity was unmistakable. Now, let us connect the threads. The secret knowledge of the Cathars, encoded in the alien script of the Voynich Manuscript, a member of the Brotherhood founded from the ashes of Mons Figa, a man whose extended, unnatural life was a product of the very knowledge he was sworn to protect. A knowledge not just of spirit, but of life itself, of the hidden laws of biology and physics that our own science is only now beginning to glimpse. Think of his alchemy, not turning lead into gold, a fool's errand, but perfecting, removing the flaw of aging from the human body. It is the same principle. It is the core Cathar belief. The material world is flawed, but within it are sparks of perfection that can be liberated. He was the living embodiment of the Cathar heresy, a man who had seemingly cheated the flawed, decaying world of the flesh. The church that had burned his ancestors could not touch him. His official death is recorded in 1784 in the castle of Prince Charles of Hesse Castle, but it was a quiet, unwitnessed death. His grave was opened and found to be empty, and the sightings continued. He was allegedly seen in Paris during the French Revolution, years after he was supposed to be dead. He was recognized by dozens of his old acquaintances. He was seen advising Napoleon. He was spotted in the 20th. Is it possible that the Guardian is still out there, still watching over the locked book of knowledge, waiting? The world of the 18th century saw St. Germain as a marvel, an enigma. They did not realize they were looking at a soldier in a secret, ancient war. A war not of armies and cannons, but of knowledge versus ignorance. A war for the soul of humanity. He was not alone. The Brotherhood had other names, other faces. It was time to see if the world was ready. It was time to send out a message in a bottle, a test, a whisper that would roar across Europe and create a myth that endures to this day. If you are finding this journey into the shadows of history as fascinating as I am, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep digging up the stories they don't want you to know. Your support is what makes these deep dives possible. Now, let's get back to Europe is a powder keg of religious and political tension. The 30 Years' War is about to tear the continent apart. Science is wrestling with superstition, and into this chaotic world, a series of pamphlets appear, seemingly out of nowhere. The first is called the Fama Fraternitatis Rosicrucis, the fame of the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross. It is published anonymously in Germany in 16. It tells the story of a German nobleman, a mystic and pilgrim named Christian Rosenkreuz. According to the text, Rosenkreuz had traveled to the Middle East in the 15th century and learned a secret wisdom from Arab sages and Persian magicians, a wisdom that combined alchemy, mysticism, and science into a perfect universal system of knowledge. He returned to Germany and founded nothing less than the complete reformation of mankind, a new dawn of enlightenment and spiritual freedom. The pamphlet states that Rosenkreuz's tomb has recently been discovered, perfectly preserved, and now the time is right for the Brotherhood to reveal itself and share its knowledge with the world. But it gives no address, no contact information. It simply invites the wise and worthy to make their desire to join known. The Rosicrucian furor, as it was called, was one of the first truly mass media events in history. Pamphlets and counter-pamphlets were printed by the thousands. The greatest minds of the age, from the philosopher René Descartes to the scientist Francis Bacon, were captivated. Everyone wanted to join the Rosicrucians, but no one could find them. They were an invisible college, a second pamphlet. The Confessio Fraternitatis followed, then a third, the strange allegorical tale called The Chimical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. They offered a vision of a world free from tyranny, ignorance, and religious dogma, a world guided by divine wisdom to the powers that be, the Pope in Rome, the Habsburg Emperor. It was a direct threat to their entire system of control. It was the Cathar heresy reborn, repackaged for a new age. It offered a direct path to God without the need for priests or popes. It promised a science that could unlock the secrets of creation. It was a declaration of war, but how do you fight an enemy you cannot see? Historians today are divided. Most believe, they say, Christian Rosenkreuz never existed. But what if they are missing the point? What if the story of Rosenkreuz was a parable, a deliberate piece of misdirection? What if the Brotherhood was real, but far, far older than the fictional founder they created? Let us assemble the pieces on the board. We have the ancient Gnostic wisdom of the Cathars, the Grail, which escapes the fires of Mont's finger. We have this knowledge encoded into an unreadable book, the Voynich Manuscript. We have an immortal guardian, the Count of St. Germain, who watches over this secret through the centuries. What is the most logical next step for such a secret society to perpetuate itself, to recruit new members, to test the intellectual and spiritual climate of the world? The Rosicrucian pamphlets were not a hoax. They were a recruitment poster. They were a way for the ancient Brotherhood, the descendants of the Cathars, to identify potential allies, the brilliant forward-thinking minds who were tired of the old ways. And it worked. The idea of the Rosicrucians, the idea of a secret brotherhood of enlightened beings guiding humanity, spread like wildfire. It inspired the creation of other secret societies like Freemasonry. The Brotherhood didn't need to have a public headquarters. Its members were already in the highest positions of society. They were the quiet astronomers, the dissident philosophers, the alchemists working in secret labs, the poets dreaming of a better world. The Rosicrucians were the hidden hand that nudged Europe towards a new way of thinking. They were fighting their war against ignorance, not with swords, but with ideas, and a man who could walk into any court, speak to any king, and plant the seeds of change. He was the visible face of an invisible college. Think of the timing. The pamphlets appear, creating an intellectual firestorm. A century later, as the ideas they championed take hold, St. Germain appears to personally guide the process, acting as a secret diplomat and advisor. It is a plan that has been in motion since those 4 parfaits slipped down the cliffs of Mont's Figue. This is the dark chapter deleted from your history books. The neat story of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment was not an accident. It was not the inevitable march of progress. It was the result of a secret war, a cultural and spiritual battle waged by a hidden brotherhood against the established powers of the world. They sought to free humanity from the prison of the material world, the world of the evil god their Cathar ancestors had identified. They wanted to awaken the spark of divine light within every person. The official history tells you that the Enlightenment was about reason banishing faith. The truth is far more complex. It was about one kind of faith, a secret Gnostic faith in human potential. The forces of control, the ones who burned the Cathars, who hunted the Rosicrucians, who dismissed St. Germain as a charlatan, are still with us. They are the ones who prefer a populace that is docile, obedient, and ignorant of its own power. The Brotherhood, the guardians of the flame, are also still with us. Where is the Voynich Manuscript now? It sits in the Beinecke rare book and manuscript, a book that no one can read, hiding in plain sight. Is it a dormant weapon? A final message waiting for the one person or the one consciousness that can finally turn the key? And what of St. Germain? Does an immortal ever truly retire? Or does he simply adopt a new name, a new face, and continue his work in our own time? Perhaps he is a quiet philanthropist funding radical new science. The history books give you a map of the world, but it is a flat map. It doesn't show the hidden dimensions, the secret passages, the invisible currents that truly guide our destiny. The story of the Cathars, the Voynich Manuscript, the Count of St. Germain, and the Rosicrucians is not a collection of unrelated mysteries. It is a single narrative, the story of a flame of knowledge, a legacy of defiance against the self-proclaimed masters of the world. It suggests that history is not a closed book, but an ongoing struggle, a secret war that is still being fought right now in the hearts and minds of every one of us. The choice is the same one that was offered at Montfégue, to bow to the forces of control and accept the comfortable story you've been told, or to leap from the wall into the darkness. It is a reminder that the world is far stranger, far more mysterious, and far more magical than they want you to believe. It is a challenge to stop reading history and start making it. The official record will tell you that this is all speculation, a fantasy woven from coincidences and folklore. They will tell you to trust the experts, to believe the accepted narrative. But as you close your textbook, ask yourself one last question. Why did they hunt for the Rosicrucians with such fury? Why did the most powerful people in Europe fear a man like St. Germain? They weren't afraid of heresy. They weren't afraid of charlatans. They were afraid of something real. They were afraid that these people held a key that could unlock the prison, and they were afraid, above all, that you might one day find it. The search for that key, the continuation of that secret war, is the real, unwritten. It continues to this day, in the quiet places, in the curious minds, in the hearts of those who refuse to believe that this flawed, material world is all there is. The flame was never extinguished. It is waiting for you to find it. All right? That is all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and give it a like to support us. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.